Good evening. Good to see you all tonight. Glad that you're out and you're ready for a little study. You need to make sure you have your number one book with you, because we will be referencing and pulling from the text. Hopefully you've read chapter 6 from the Barnabas Factor. We're looking, as you remember or you may recall, as we've been walking through this, we looked at the activities of an encourager earlier in September, and as we start in October, and we began it a couple of weeks ago, we started looking at the anatomy of an encourager. What makes up an encourager? Anatomy, that's the body parts. And so we looked last week at the brain and the mind, and what are we putting in? And as encouragers, what should we be putting in so we prepare ourselves to be thinking about what goes in our head? The graphics are going to be off a little bit tonight. I can tell from the first one already. Don't worry, Bill. It's okay. But so this first one, you're going to see the picture, and I'll ask you the first question. The first thing that you should see here is, are you Mr. Magoo? So the question is do you know what who Mr. Magoo is, and are you a Mr. Magoo? Who is Mr. Magoo? I'm sorry? Sometimes I am, yes. Are you familiar with Mr. Magoo? Do you know who he is? Some of the gray heads say, yeah, I know who that is. That was a gentleman, that was a cartoon character who did not see very good, but he was always very fortunate. He could walk the straight line even though he was blind. He could get where he was going to go, but he really did not have any vision to look towards the future. He was very nearsighted. And we're going to talk about, are we like that? Do we wind up sometimes being Mr. Magoo, where we're not seeing down the road like perhaps we should? Because you see, when we consider our interaction with the world, and this is part of what everything I'm going to talk to you about is coming from within this. So hopefully you've got this and you've been following in this book. What we're going to talk about as we interact with the world, we have a most valuable asset, and that is our eyes. We take in so much with our eyes. We speak with our eyes. And if you don't think that's the case, you know this is the case, because you can communicate interest and you can communicate compassion with your eyes. Just the way that you engage someone. Whether you're looking at the edge of your seat, whether your eyes are open, or whether your eyes are rolling back to the back of your head, you are communicating with them. And it's either welcoming, and I'm interested to hear more. I try to tell song leaders when I'm working with them, you will speak volumes with your face. It's not just a matter of plastering a smile on your face, it's what your eyes are saying too. And if your eyebrows are up, that shows interest, and I want to be a part. Ladies and gentlemen, as encouragers, we speak with our face. We speak with our eyes. And sometimes it's not that good of a message that we're saying. So we want to make sure that we're communicating. But the other thing I think is very interesting is with our eyes, we are always collecting information. Or at least we should be. I would say, and Albert uses the words vital information, we're always looking and collecting with our eyes. As an encourager, I'm noticing if there's someone who is discouraged. At least I should be aware of that. Think about coming in here this evening. Think about if you were at supper tonight. Think about when you're out and about. Do you pay attention to folks? Do you see the person who's downcast? Do you see the person who's sitting by themselves? See, your eyes are collecting information. You're interacting with the world. And encouragers are looking for ways I can be a part of helping someone or being a part of supporting someone. So as we think about eyes of an encourager, I really want us to open this up. But I want us to start first taking God's word and looking at what we see about sight in John chapter 9. Now, if you're familiar with this passage, if you know what's happening here, Jesus is going to heal a blind man. Very fitting that Aubrey puts this into this chapter, because he's going to help someone who is blind. Now, the interesting part with this process, as we look at John chapter 9, verses 1 through 7, the conversation is not about how we can heal this man or help this man. What's the first thing the disciples say, if you've read this or if you're seeing there? Who's the sinner in this situation? Here's a guy who's been blind. Take a look at this. And as he passed by, that would be Christ, he saw a man who is blinded from birth. He's never seen the light of day. He's always been in darkness. And his disciples asked Jesus. They did not ask, how can we help him? Do you think maybe we can do something to support him? They go, I wonder if he sinned or if his parents sinned. And I can't help but wonder if Jesus went, what? Are you listening to yourself? This is a guy who needs something. He needs help. And you're talking about sin in someone's life. Now, if you understand the process behind here, the idea behind this, and I think it's very interesting, there was a principle that there's no death without sin and there's no suffering without iniquity. In other words, if there is something that's going wrong, there's a reason for it. Job is a prime example of that. Job's friends said, you sinned, that's why you're getting punished the way that you are. It's the principle of death without sin, suffering without iniquity. They were even capable of thinking, and I thought this was very interesting in my notes, they were even capable of thinking that a child could sin in the womb. He hadn't even been born and he's got sin. Or that his soul might have sinned in a pre-existent state. They also held that terrible punishments came on certain people because of the sins of their parents. You see, that's the idea that if there's trouble, and we kind of adopt that a little bit, well, he's having some trouble. He probably did something he shouldn't have done. We have a tendency to adopt that. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that's what encouragers should be looking for. If you see someone who's struggling, don't ask the question, I wonder if they sinned or if somebody else did something to them. See what you can do to help them. Be an arm that reaches out. So Jesus replies to them and says, it was neither that this man sinned, nor his parents that it was so. But it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. There's a purpose behind this, and it's so that God can be glorified. Verse 4, we must work the works of him who sent me. He said, we've got to do the work of God while I'm here. Listen to what he says here. As long as it is day. That sounds like my dad. Did you ever hear that? Your dad? You got to work because once the sun goes down, you can't see and the work's over. Now we have lights on our tractors, and now we have lights in the shop, and now we can keep the lights on the building. But there was a day when when the sun goes down, you're done working. There's no electrical lights. And you can't use the lantern to get the work done that you need to. We've got to work while it is day. You know Jesus is not talking physical. He's talking about as long as you have me here in the world. The night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, Jesus says this very clearly and plainly for us. I am the light of the world. You know, I love this. I love this imagery, and we see this in other places where Jesus refers to him as the light, as himself as the light. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And when we hold on to that, it's important for us to realize that the eye can see, the physical eye can see in bright or dim light. Right now, it's easy to see. And we could even dim these lights. We could turn off all but maybe just the insets, and we would still be able to see. Our eyes would have to adapt to it. But what happens when you go into Carlsbad Caverns? You don't see anything. You don't see anything. Your eyes strain to catch some glimmer of light, but you see nothing. It's dark. I wear contacts, corrective lenses, and I'm kind of cheap, and my wife can attest to that pretty easily. But I have found where I can wear one contact and not two, and when I do that, this contact right here sees the distance that I need, and this eye sees the close-up. Because I am nearsighted. I can see stuff here, but I can't see stuff out there. Well, if I have two contacts in, guess what happens? I can see you all perfectly. But when I open my Bible, I'm like, it's kind of like playing the trombone. You're trying to read it that way. So I'll have my reading glasses. I haven't used reading glasses in a long time because I only wear one contact now. If I take my contacts out, I can read my Bible, but I can't see nothing out there. Thus, one contact in, one contact out. I was told by my eye doctor that works. And I thought, no, not really. I don't want to try it. I don't want to try that. Doesn't sound like it. Give me a headache. Right. Yes. So whenever I put one contact in, that allows me to see distance and close up. But something very unique happened last week. And I was telling Vicki about this. ETCA had their pep rally. And we had all the getting ready for the football game on Saturday afternoon, and Paul was out there, and I think a couple others might have come to watch. And so we had all the cheerleaders in there, and a whole school was in, 130 plus people in, and they wanted to do something different. They turned all the lights out, and the cheerleaders had reflective stuff. So when they were doing their cheers and stuff, you could see that. And there's a few people that were dressed in neon, you could see that. But when those lights went off, everything for me was fuzzy. I couldn't see. Now, I still had this contact in that could see distance, but all that was adapting to the darkness was this eye that could see close up. And so even I had that ability, once the darkness came, I couldn't see anymore. I thought that was an incredible example of when I have light, I can see, even in dim light, but the absence of light, the eyes cannot see. Ladies and gentlemen, when we take Christ out of our lives, we're in darkness. When you see people who are struggling with sin and they do not have light, they need you to help open their eyes. You can continue reading this story in John chapter 9, and you can see how Jesus healed him. And actually, that's a pretty fantastic story, because he spits in the clay and he puts a poultice on his eyes out of the spittle. And he tells him to go and wash. Remember, this guy's blinded for life. He goes and washes in the pool of Siloam, and he comes back and he can see. And how he's able to traverse that, that is an example of God's power. That's the example of the light. So when we realize the fact that I have to have light in order to see, I cannot take out the light, then it becomes darkness. But there's something else that happens that I think is an interesting phenomenon when we consider our eyes. And that's spiritual eye disease. And I want to throw you a couple of quotes. If you've got your book, you can find these on page 67. Remember, we're wanting to be encouragers. We want to bring people to a point of feeling that I can do this. I want to have hope. I want to be able to have that. This is going to be okay. And there's so much around us that feels hopeless. Discouraged and discouraging people are convinced that their view of the world is true. This is terrible. It's not going to get any better. And they're convinced in their darkness, in their depression, in their discouragement, I can't do anything about this. It's just the way it is. We have to come in as encouragers and help change that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're in that spot and you're feeling that sense of discouragement, and I don't know where else to go with this, you've got to realize you've got light. You can see. But here's what happens as far as the spiritual disease is concerned. Aubrey Johnson goes on to say, just as cataracts cloud the vision, sin can obscure the ability to see other people's life opportunities in a healthy way. I wonder if sometimes we don't have spiritual cataracts. And we're clouded over from being able to see the opportunities. Do we realize the light that we can shine through Jesus Christ? We know that he's the light of the world. And we know that we have an opportunity to shine our light. Good grief, we teach that to our kids, don't we? What's one of the first songs we teach our kids? I'm going to let it shine. Should I hide it under a bushel? No. Do I want the devil to it out? Absolutely not. I'm going to shine it all over my neighborhood. We teach that to our kids. But how quickly we forget about it as we get older. How quickly those cataracts begin to cloud us up. How quickly we let sin and the devil discourage us. This is the way it always goes. And you know that's the case because you've seen that in people. You've seen that in individuals that don't have time for you. People who should be caring people, who should be loving, who should be concerned about you. And I know I'm picking on the medical community, but you know that's the case. You've seen the doctors with bad bedside manners who don't spend time sitting down with you and talking with you, who got too busy. Ladies and gentlemen, we sometimes become so busy, we don't have time for each other. We've got to be careful about this. I love this quote, and I want to read this to you real quickly. If you've got your books, you can follow with me. It's on page 68. I was sharing this with Vicki. Encouragers, if we want to be encouragers, we are in the reclaiming business. We should be reclaiming. We should be helping people like a deep sea diver retrieves lost treasure from a submerged ship. You see, when we have people who have got some good stuff inside, but they're so lost they don't see it. Encouragers dig deep down where these ships are, where there's some wrecked confidence, where there's floundering hope, and we revive that. That's what encouragers should do. I love this quote. People's best qualities often lurk beneath the surface. Our best qualities are so close, but they're just buried beneath the surface. And the riches resting at the bottom of the sea are no benefit unless they can be raised. You see, if you consider the sunken treasure in a ship, what good is it doing? It's doing no good. Someone's got to have the courage to dive down to retrieve that. Similarly, the talents and gifts of discouraged people must be brought to the surface if they are to be enjoyed. So who's going to go and get those sunken treasures? Who's going to be willing to do that? Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be God's people. It's going to be the encouragers. It's going to be the people who say, I can do this. But that means we've got to look through eyes that care. That means we've got to look at things in a situation that says, you're valuable to me. You're worth it to me. You know, you've seen this picture before. For some people, you know what they would say? That's a persistent little duckling. He's going to make it up there. Other people say that's not persistent. That's just stubborn. See, it's all a matter of whether we perceive it. When you see individuals, do you see them as a potential or do you see them as a problem? The discourager says, I'm not going to waste my time on that. The encourager says, how can I help? I want to have courage. Remember, we talked about that weeks ago. I want to have courage to see them as a persistent person, and I'm going to be a part of that to help them, not a stubborn individual. So let's talk about this on a spiritual level, and I'm hoping that the fonts will come through on this a little bit, or we'll continue. I want us to take the same process on spiritually as we consider the eyesight. Two ways of eyesight. Do you remember what those are? What would we call those? If I can read right here, but I can't see out there, what's that called? I'm sorry? That's nearsighted. I can see near, but I can't see out there. If it's out there, but not here, it is farsighted. That's the same process, but I want us to talk through this on a spiritual level. Consider the person who is farsighted spiritually. What does that look like? This is where I stop talking, you do talk. What's a spiritual person who is farsighted? Think about that. Almost called on you, Logan. A person spiritually who's farsighted. What would that be, do you think?
Realizing what the eternal consequences are of our behavior.
Okay. Taking a look at the eternal consequences, very good, of our behavior. What else?
They see themselves and what they can just do for themselves.
See themselves, what they can do for themselves. Okay? I like the quote on this one. Unable to see good in the present. If I am spiritually farsighted, I'm seeing all that out there, but I'm not seeing what can be done in the present. I'm looking out there, and boy, he needs to work on his attitude. Boy, I can't believe she does that, and I'm not looking at the current. It's kind of like this, and I thought Aubrey Johnson quoted this pretty well. It's kind of like the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. Man, if only it was like that, it would be so much better. I wish I had it as good as they have it. And you understand that. You've seen that one. So when I'm farsighted spiritually, I'm not taking a look here. I'm always looking out there. And I need to be doing a little bit of internal investigation. But what about the nearsighted person spiritually? What does that look like? They have no vision. Very good. And see, it's almost the reverse of it. And that's what far and nearsighted is. Farsighted is I can see out there. Nearsighted is I can see right here. I have to have that balance. Thus, my contacts or my readers. So when I consider a person who is spiritually nearsighted, there's no vision for the future. Take your Bibles. Do you ever thought I don't want to run past you? Okay, I'm trying to read faces, and if I misinterpret, I don't want me to do that. Take your Bible and turn, if you would, to Proverbs chapter 29. Proverbs chapter 29. I love the book of Proverbs because it gives us small little bite sizes little gems of things to dissect and to work on and to chew on. And you can read through this with different passages and different one-liners, but I like what Solomon says in chapter 29 in verse 18. I'll go ahead and back you up to verse 17. Correct your son, and he will give you comfort. He will also delight your soul. In other words, discipline is what that's talking about. But verse 18, where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained. This passage says, where there's no vision, the people perish. And that may be your text, that may be your term. But happy is he who keeps the law. When I first looked at that, does anybody else have anything besides unrestricted or perished in your translation? What was that?
Where there's no revelation, the people cast off restraint.
Cast off restraint. Very good. What else? Run wild. Where there is no vision, people cast off restraint. Where there's no vision, people run wild. You've already looked at Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18. I want you to look at Exodus. Turn on to the beginning of the Old Testament. Look at Exodus chapter 32. This is the point where Moses has come down from the mountain. And do you remember what he finds? He found the people. His own brother, who is Aaron, had made an idol, a golden calf, and the people were running wild. Take a look at what the passage says here. Exodus chapter 32. I'm going to go ahead and back us up to 19 because I like the context of this. And it came about as soon as Moses came near the camp that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger burned, and he threw the tablets from his hand and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. Verse 20. He took the calf which they had made, and he burned it with fire and ground it to powder and scattered over the surface of the water and made the sons of Israel drink it. That's punishment. Verse 21. Then Moses said to Aaron, now he turns to his brother, what did this people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them? Well, how did they get in your head to cause you to do what you've done? You're leading them while in my absence. Aaron says in verse 22, do not let the anger of my Lord burn. You know the people yourself, for they are prone to evil. He's talking about the Israelites. For they said to me, and I love this because it's like, are you kidding me? It sounds like a 5-year-old. Make a God for us who will go before us. For this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And I said to them, whoever has any gold, let them tear it off. So they gave it to me, and I threw it in the fire, and out came this calf. Yeah, I don't think that's the way it worked. I think you probably did a little bit of molding, a little bit of carving with this. Moses or Aaron, it just didn't happen like that. But our word that I want us to focus on, our verse, is this next one, verse 25. Now when Moses saw that the people were out of control, for Aaron had let them get out of control, to be a diversion among their enemies. Then Moses stood at the gate of the camp and said, whoever is for the Lord, come with me. And all the sons of Levi gathered to him. And you can read that account. That's a fantastic one. But the point is, as Moses said, and this is what I want you to hear. We read that Moses saw that the people were out of control. That's the same word we read in Hebrew that says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained. If you don't have vision, if you can't see out there, if you become so nearsighted that you lose fact that there's some people we got to help, ladies and gentlemen, you're out of control. You're not doing what God has called you to do. And when that comes to our mind and when we start to realize I've got to be accountable for what I'm doing, otherwise I'm no different than the unruly. And you know this is true. We read this all the time in the scriptures where it says, You know who the kingdom of heaven is not reserved for. It's not going to go to the murderers. It's not going to go to the effeminate. It's not going to go to the homosexuals. It also includes liars and those who are disobedient to parents. You see, when we consider the fact that God is very clear with this, don't be out of control or you'll perish. Don't lose your vision of what God has called you to do, because when you do that, you're out of control. You perish. So as I consider that, I've got to be thinking, and I've got to be looking, I've got to be planning and seeing how I can encourage, how I can build, how I can bring people closer to our God. I think it's interesting. He takes a chapter here in this book, and he looks at seeing glory in the ordinary. What does that mean to you? To see glory in the ordinary.
Everyday life.
In everyday life?
Seeing the glory of God in just everything that you participate in life.
Give me, Stan, I think you're exactly right. Give me an example of what that would look like.
Well, if you're at work and you see somebody struggling, that's an everyday occurrence. Help them out, show them compassion. It's an everyday thing.
Something that happens all the time around us. But we have to be looking for it, don't we? We have to see it. What else? That's a good point. What else?
We're all made in the image of God. And we don't look on one another as God looks on us. God sees us through the blood of Christ. We see each other and go by outward appearances.
Is that easy to do, just to go in the outward appearance? Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Similar to what he was saying, seeing someone and looking at them as if that God loves this person. That's sometimes hard to do. We don't look at each other and remember that, God is fond of you.
Especially if they're different.
What these men are talking about is so key. We have a tendency to say, well, they're not like me, so it's different. And we fail to realize that these are God's creation. Do we value them? They may be sunken treasure. Do we have the courage to dive down and help them? Do we have the desire to encourage and lift each other up? Ladies and gentlemen, you know this. If we take this decision to be encouragers, to be ones who will reclaim that lost sunken treasure that's just lying beneath the surface, it will take work. It doesn't just happen. It will take work. Yes, sir.
Whenever I was reading this in the book, first thought that came to mind when I saw glory in the ordinary was Jesus in the garden when he prayed. Said, the glory which you have given me, I have given to them. So we, in 2 Peter talks about becoming partakers of God's nature, of the divine nature of God. We have that. And we need to look at other people in the same light.
What Paul is saying, when we start to realize that we are God's creation and that he has made us in the image of himself, when we realize that that is all of his creation, that's all the people that we walk across. Now, some of them have made decisions that have really turned them down a dark road, but that's because there's no light. We have an opportunity to help shine the light. But ladies and gentlemen, we got to open our eyes and see it. We got to have in our minds and be prepared to know how to do this. We're going to talk about how we have to have ears that hear and know how to be able to pick up on things. And we're going to talk about what we say from our mouths and then what we do with our hands. All of this is part of the encourager. It's part of the anatomy. What will we do to help other people who are made in God's image, who have the opportunity to have his glory, just ordinary? And it may be around the water cooler at work. It could very well be on the road as you're driving and somebody's got a broken down tire. I drive by that all the time. What do I do? Sometimes I think the reason we don't do this, I'm going to get personal real quick. I think the reason we don't do this is because sometimes we get snake bit. It was probably back in 90, it was when we lived in Colorado Springs before Logan was born. So that would have been 92, I guess. And I was driving to work, and we lived in an apartment complex. And I was pulling out of going down in the parking lot. A guy comes backing out and just rams right in the side of my Ford Bronco. Put a great big dent in me. And so we stopped, and I'm trying to have a good countenance because I didn't do anything wrong, and he did, and he's very sorrowful. And so what did I say? What most all of us would say. It's going to be okay. We'll get this worked out. Don't want to get the police involved. I don't have insurance. And he was all, I'll pay for it. And I said, it's okay. And I knew where he lived. His apartment's right there. And so we exchanged information and numbers. And I said, we'll get this figured out. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. We'll get it figured out. And day after day went by, and I contacted him. He said, yeah, I'm trying to get this together. I'll get it. Could you get a couple of quotes so I can kind of know? I've got that. So we went this day after day after week after, it went to about a couple of months. And I said, I really need to get this taken care of. And he said, yeah, I know. He said, I'm still trying to get some things taken care of. And then it stopped. He didn't answer my calls anymore. I knew where his apartment was, and I'd knock on his door and he wouldn't answer. I'd been in his apartment, and it just stopped. And I thought, okay, this isn't good. But I'm trying to think the best. Finally, it got to the point that, and I even knew where he was. He was stationed at Fort Carson, outside south of Colorado Springs. And I thought, I got to get this taken care of. So I contacted his commanding officer. And I said, could I have a chance to visit with you and explain it? And he said, sure, come on in. So he came, so I met with him. Vic, I think you're with me. No, just me. So I met in his office, in this commanding officer's office, and talk about being intimidated, not knowing I'm not military. And he said, you need to know right now that he denies everything. And I said, what do you mean? He can't deny it. I got his handwriting, and I've been to his home. I know he did this, and he said, I know, but he's saying he didn't have anything to do with it. And I said, well, am I going to get a chance to visit with him? He said he's on his way up. So in a little bit, he walked in, and I'll never forget the look on his face. It was like, who are you? And I thought, oh, my word, I just got snake bit. I got nothing out of the guy. And his commanding officer said, I can't do anything. Even though I know you've got this, there's nothing I can do. He's saying he didn't do it. Well, we talked for a little bit, and he left. And after he left, his commanding officer said, I know that guy, and he is a crook. He's just a bad seed. And he said, I'm sorry this happened to you, but there's not a lot I can do. And so I went and paid however much I paid to get it repaired. But sometimes we get snake bit, and we go, I'm not going to help them. Are you kidding me? I don't want to be out. That's logical. Stay with me on this because you're not going to like what I'm going to say next. That's logical, but that's not godly. Because God says, when someone slaps you, you give them the other cheek. When someone takes your coat, you say, here's my shirt too. When someone forces you into labor to go a mile, go ahead and carry their backpack for another mile. That's not what we do. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's not scripture, ladies and gentlemen. That's us. That's what we say. Even though we're fearful of I don't want to reach out too much because that ordinary might hurt me, that's not the approach that Christ tells us to take. As Christians, we are to be like those first century disciples, and we are to turn the world upside down. We're to do things different. When people look at us, they should say, I don't know what it is about that guy. Maybe he's just weird, but he's different. He's maybe ordinary, but there's glory in him. And they don't use those words. And somebody from within the world, and you know that face. Will Rogers made this statement, I never met a man I didn't like. To define that, what he was saying is he said there's something in everyone that's likable. There's something in everyone that's likable. We should not look and say, well, he's a bad seed. I don't have anything to do with him. I've heard her talk. I'm not going to have her in my home anymore. That's not what God calls us to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got to look at people and say, they are made in the image of God, and they need him. And they may never come to him. They may never come to him. But you know where you stand. And don't move from there. Stay close to him. Because what this means, quite honestly, is we're going to have to focus. We're going to have to focus in on doing what God calls us to do. And you'll never be able to do it if you don't have your number one book as your foundation. If this is not what you live on. If you live on Netflix, then that focusing will never happen. If you live on the world, then you'll never focus on people. You'll focus on yourself. Because that's what the world says to do. But when this becomes my priority, even people that are jerks are people that matter. I have to keep reminding myself that Jesus was spit upon. He was hit with a stick. They took thorns, not just little stickers, not just little stickers. They took thorns and they crushed him down on his head. They took nails and they drove him through him. They whipped him within an inch of his life. They did everything possible to humiliate him. And he did not say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame. He didn't say that. He didn't say, well, that's a bad seed. I'm not going to have anything to do with them. He said, Father, forgive them. Because they don't know what they're doing. Do we look at people when we see them struggling and say, Father, help me work with them. Forgive me when I don't do the things I should do to reach out to them. Help me to focus. Help me to see the good in people. This was an interesting section. He called it Unrealistic Standards. And you'll know what I mean when I start to come through this one. Because really, quite frankly, the part I picked out was he's picking on parents. You see, encouragers, if we are to be encouragers, we're like a proud parent. Let me just ask you what that looks like. Because I think every one of us out here, most all of us are proud parents or we are parents. What does a proud parent look like? What does it do? What does he or she do? I'm sorry? Brags? That's my boy. What does a proud parent do? Come on, you know the answer to these. Shows up at every school event. You better believe it.
Look for ways to brag on our kids, to cheer them on.
Cheer on my kids. Brag on them. You go to the school events. Your refrigerators are empty, right? No, your refrigerators have pictures on them. They got some of the, and this is another sidebar. I'm going to can I take this one real quick on this little sidebar? When your child draws a picture for you, and he's 2 or 3 years old, or 1 year old, and it's a scribble, Mom and Dad, what do you do with that? You say, oh, look at this masterpiece. Man, he is good. I love this. And you put it up there. If you're a dad and you've got an office, you might have it on your door of your office. I did. When Logan, Emily, and Dylan were growing up at Waterview, I'd have some of their coloring pictures on the, and we're proud of that. Here's the sidebar. As my children grew older, they didn't give me pictures like that. They actually stopped giving me pictures at all. But if they gave me a picture, it was a little bit nicer. It was a little bit more groomed up. It was cleaned. It was within the lines. You know what I'm talking about. They were able to color and do things that looked pretty good. I wonder if sometimes we look at what we give to our God and we paint a picture for him, and we're just kind of scribble and put it out there, and God says, oh, this is good. This is good. He's learning. She's trying to grow. She's given me this gift of praise from what she knows in her mind. But we are not expected to stay there. I don't keep coloring outside the lines for my God. I grow, and my pictures should be better. Now, if I take that same analogy and I draw a picture for God at the stage I am today, and it looks like a 2-year-old colored it, I think God would say, you can do better, can't you? We would do the same with our kids. If you've got a 15 or 16 or a 20-year-old and they gave you a picture that was colored that looked like a 2-year-old had done it, you would say, I think you can do better than that. Son, why don't you try that again? You can do better with that. You don't stay satisfied with that. In our praise to God, we need to make sure we do our very best. Because as proud parents, we want to encourage our children with perceiving and praising their efforts. When we see the things that they do, we go, that's great. We go to the games because even though they may never get the ball in the hoop on the basketball, or they may never ever score or catch the ball, we're praising them for their effort. When a child first learns to walk, those first few steps cause the parent to do what? Take pictures and smile and say, that's my little man, look at him, he's so cute, he's getting so big. And he waddles and takes a few steps and falls, and that's okay, you prop him up. You would never hear a parent. I think I can say this with confidence. You would never hear a parent say, well, yeah, he's doing okay, but he's not ready to run the marathon yet. Because that's not what we do as parents. As encouragers, we say, you're doing great, keep going. We perceive and we praise the effort. That's what we do as encouragers. We look at people where they're at and we take them to the next step, but we don't stay there. I don't want my son to stay at that stage. I want him to be able to get to the marathon. But I've got to take him on each step. When you find someone who is depressed or who's discouraged or is down, don't say, well, you should get yourself up and pull yourself up by the bootstraps and make this work. Come on, you can do better than this. You take them where they're at and you bring them to that point. You bring them to the point where they can make it. This passage in the book I thought was good. Encouragers are like talent scouts, a talent scout, who help people discover their inherent worth and their hidden ability. If you want to be an encourager, you'll be like a talent scout who will look at people and say, you know what, you got the potential to do this. But that means, did you hear the word? We got to look for them. We got to look for each other. We got to be keeping our eyes open and not be content with just saying, well, I hope they get this done. Encouragers take it to the next step. They take it to the next level. And they keep their eyes open and they're looking. Last week, I gave your homework assignment. Do you remember it? I know that Daniel and Kim do because I pinpointed them last week. Your homework assignment last week was to encourage your coworker. So I'm going to ask you a question. How did you do that? Now you're sitting there thinking, he told us we was not going to turn any assignments in. And I won't tell you to turn any assignment. But think about it. How did you encourage your coworker? What did you do? And some of you are doing this homework because you're telling me, hey, I was able to do this, and that's a good thing. Keep doing this. Keep doing those. But how did you do it? You've got to ask yourself before you leave here, when you see this next homework assignment, you got to ask yourself, how am I going to do it? What am I going to do and how am I going to do it? Well, here's your assignment. I want you to, in this congregation, and this is going to be easy because it's going to be right here. I want you to encourage a deacon. Now you might say, well, I'm not sure who our deacons are. Don't worry, I've got their pictures for you. Look for Eric and Seth and Gerald and Jeff and Tim. Look for these men. These are your deacons. These are the servants that are helping here. Go and find them and encourage them. It may be a note. It may be a little note that you write and say, thank you for your work and your service in the sound booth. Thank you for the service that you do on the grounds and keeping things going this way. Thank you you need to make sure, ladies and gentlemen, that you encourage each other. And this week, find these men and give them some encouragement. When we come back next week, we're going to continue with the anatomy. We've talked about the mind. We've looked at the eyes, no pun intended. We're going to look at the ears. And what I want us to phrase, and the way I'm going to turn it to you this time is, do you hear what I hear? Are you hearing the things that are being said, being spoken? And with that information, and with your eyes open, let's be encouragers. Let's go to our Father in prayer that we dismissed. Father, we thank you for the day that you've given to us and for this time to gather together. And I pray that it's been an opportunity that we've grown closer to each other. But Father, moreover, that we've grown closer to your word and to you and knowing what you want us to do in this life. Would you please help us to be encouragers? would you please help us to realize the potential that you have given to each one of us, that we can reach out to our brothers and sisters, and even those who are not even a part of this fellowship, to show them Jesus Christ, to encourage them to live lives that honor you. Father, forgive us when we fail to have courage. Forgive us when we fail to see the opportunities that you lie right before our feet. And Father, let us be men and women who will be like Barnabas and encourage each other, all the more as we see the day drawing near. I ask this in the name of your Son and our Savior, Jesus' most precious and holy name. Amen. Thank you all for being here.